Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host. And joining me, as always, asking the fundamental question, are you not entertained? It's Mr. Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
I'm the crazy and evil co-host.
Oh, what a twist!
Yep.
On the formula.
Yep. And everything. I'm going to make everything be really bad, despite the fact that it's been fine up until now, and that it was fine. It was fine at the end of the last episode, but now everything's awful.
This week on the show, we are originally going to be covering our final Best Picture nominee for the 2025 Oscars, the movie I'm Still Here. Unfortunately, that movie was not available on VOD yet, and in the greater Dallas area, I don't know about up where you live, Matt, but in my neck of the woods, was showing on one theater 20 minutes away from me at 3 p.m. So that clearly wasn't going to work for me. One showing a day, 3 p.m. So wasn't able to see that movie yet. So we're going to circle back around to that film to wrap up that series in a couple weeks when it's out. But we had to do something, so we decided we needed to revisit our old friend Ridley Scott and check out the movie that he made last year, which was not nominated for Best Picture, Gladiator II. So that's what we're going to be doing. I think, Matt, we've been making a podcast for a long, long time. People might have forgotten that the original Gladiator is a pretty core, fundamental film for Matt Freeman, right?
Oh, yeah. That was one of those movies that I watched dozens of times, have it memorized. Formative movie for me, and my love of film probably cemented me as a Ridley Scott fan at a pretty young age, to the point where probably led into us wanting to do the deconstructing Ridley Scott in the first place, I think.
Yeah, which we did. We watched and reviewed all 500 Ridley Scott films. A mixed bag, I think, fair to say. There were some movies in there that absolutely are some of the greatest films of all time, and then there were a lot of stinkers. Where will Gladiator 2 fit? Oh, well, you'll just have to find out. Matt, I also wanted to talk to you about the Oscars, because the Oscars were last weekend. We're still not done with our series on them, but the show itself is over. It happened last Sunday. And I wanted to start this episode by having kind of just a quick recap with you, because you watched the Academy Awards.
To be specific, I watched whatever 2 hours of the Academy Awards Hulu allowed us to before they So, okay, for those who don't know, and I don't actually know really what happened behind the scenes.
I know what happened. What happened.
Well, maybe you can explain what happened then.
Yeah, well, you say what happened in your experience, and then I'll tell you what actually happened.
Well, so the subjective experience is you're watching the Oscars, and you've watched it for about 2 hours, I think. And we're getting to the final round of awards. I think maybe there were 2 or 3 awards left, and it just stops, and it's like this show is not available, this show doesn't exist. And you go to the menu, and there's no Academy Awards option, not even to watch like the VOD. And then I'm just like, okay, I guess I'm done, and don't get to find out who won Best Picture, which is the whole point of this.
Yeah.
I don't want to come off as over, like, obviously that sucked and was stupid and terrible, but like I actually enjoyed watching the Oscars, so that's something.
Yeah. So what happened was, this was the kind of the big thing this year. This is the first time the Academy Awards were going to be streamed in the history of the show, and they were going to be streamed on Hulu. And what happened, Matt, is the content folks did not talk to the engineers, because essentially what happened is the time allotted for the Academy Awards expired, and nobody told the engineers that, hey, the Oscars are notorious for going overtime. They always go overtime, always, always, always. So they had just programmed the thing that the Oscars are going to end at this time. That's when we're going to shut down the stream. And it's not, the plan was never to do like a you can watch the VOD afterwards thing. It was like a you can watch live stream. So they just shut down the stream at that time, and the Oscars were over. So they just shut it down. it's pretty embarrassing.
Mhm.
This was kind of a big so one thing that you might not know is the kind of negotiations for the Academy Awards is going to be happening in about 5 months. So they're going to have a chance to renew with, I think it's ABC, or maybe seek streaming services elsewhere to put these things up. Um, and this is a pretty big black eye on everyone involved with this, because yeah, that's super embarrassing. It's two of the most important awards of the night. It was Best Actress and Best Picture that people watching on Hulu missed. So yeah, not great, not great for sure.
Yeah, pretty annoying. I just thought it was funny, to be honest, that like finally after all these years I managed to watch it, and then they stop it literally just before I can watch the actual
Yeah.
Best Picture, which was the point of this whole show.
hmm
Um,
hmm
but Conan was great.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. I think he's going to be back. That's my guess. I think he did a very good job. I mean, if he wants the job, I think they will give him the job again.
Yeah. I mean, I love Conan O'Brien. I've always loved Conan O'Brien. I used to watch his talk show when I was like a young kid. Um,
Yeah.
I love, he was a Simpsons writer. I just think he's great. He had a great like presence. He didn't do anything stupid or cringe, which is a huge bonus when it comes to hosts
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
Oscars, because that's honestly, that's probably one of the main reasons I don't tune into the Oscars most, usually, is I kind of expect something terribly cringe to happen.
hmm
And I just feel like Conan he just has an energy where you don't have to worry about that. I don't know if that makes
Yeah.
sense, but that's how I feel about Conan.
No, I mean, he for whatever reason, like Conan's brand of humor is like exactly up my alley. Like I don't know if you ever watched. He released, I think it was on Max, like a travel show on Max where he just goes to different countries and is Conan. And I have not laughed as hard as I laughed during that thing in a long, long time. Like so funny. It's just like his zany absurdity is exactly my sense of humor. And he brought it to the show, and it was really, really good. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Um, I think so. Okay, I think there was definitely like this show always has like a lull point in the middle. Like it's a 3.5 hour thing in total, and the middle hour is always kind of like, oh, okay, we got 9 awards left. Can we go? Can we
Hmm.
get going? Um, but other than that, I really enjoyed the show. There were some weird moments. Like I thought the James Bond tribute was really strange.
Hmm.
Um, like it was extremely choreographed to the point where I was like, there's no way they like decided to do this after. So I don't know if we talked about this, but the big news was that the Broccoli family that has owned James Bond for ever basically told Amazon that they could take over the rights of producing this next movie. So they sold MGM to Amazon a while ago, but in as part of that transaction, they said, okay, but Bond we're keeping. I mean, you can ultimately produce it, but we are going to have or release it, but we are going to have like production rights on it. Like we get to decide everything. And the Broccolis have closely held that throughout their entire existence of Bond. So it was like big news. A lot of people were saying, "Oh, this is the death of Bond." Like now that this evil corporation has it, Bond is never going to be good again. And I was sitting here going, "Okay, but like, how often is Bond good?"
Right.
So I wasn't as worried about it, but like the whole tribute seemed like too like coordinated to me to think in like a week and a half they pulled this whole thing together. I just had trouble believing that, which means it was planned before then, and I just don't know like why. It was
Yeah.
weird. It was very weird.
Yeah, I honestly kind of tuned that out because I don't care that much. I mean, I've always been sort of a fan is too strong a word. I've enjoyed the Bond films for what they are, I guess is what
Yeah.
I'll say. Like they're goofy, over the top action movies,
Mhm.
and like occasionally they'll have one like actually good movie in there, like Casino Royale.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's funny. I used to say and Goldeneye, and then like you go back and watch Goldeneye, and you're like,
Oh, it's so
no,
bad.
no, no,
It's so
no.
bad. Yeah. Yeah. I thought that was weird. Another weird thing happened that I didn't notice until I like started reading around about it and I realized that I was feeling it without noticing it. there was a distinct lack of stars at the Oscars this year. I mean, there were like the people nominated, right? But like the superstars, you think your Tom Hanks, your Brad Pitt, like those type of people weren't there.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why those people weren't there is because Chris Nolan's The Odyssey is
Uh-huh.
in production right now, and half of Hollywood is in The Odyssey, so they were all in production, and none of them could go to the show. That
That's
was
funny.
very funny, but I definitely felt that like Zendaya is like one of the biggest stars right now, and she's in The Odyssey, so she was not there. So yeah, I mean, it was a good show. It was an entertaining show, I thought. And I was happy with all the winners, right? Like the big story is Honora won everything pretty much. It was nominated for 6 Academy Awards and won 5 of the 6. The only one it lost was, I think, Best Supporting Actor for the guy whose name I'm blanking on, who played the oh god, what was his name? I don't even remember his name of his character either. But he was the guy that was driving her around
Yeah.
all day. Like, he's the only one that lost. Sean Baker, the director slash producer slash writer slash editor, won 4 awards for this movie.
Yeah.
That is the second time that's ever happened. The first time it's ever happened for one movie. The only other person that's won 4 Academy Awards in one night was Walt Disney, and he won for like short documentary. Like, it was not for like the big ones, right? It was just for a bunch of side awards that happened to rank up to 4. So kind of a huge deal. Very big day for this very, very small movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we were happy with that, right? I
Yeah.
was my only, it's not a complaint, it's like a equivocation is like, man, I liked let me put it this way. Dune 2, I've watched that movie like 40 times, since it came out earlier this year. I love that movie. The Brutalist I thought was a brilliant work of art. Great movie. Honora, also a very, very good movie. And I kept feeling like each time any one of those 3 would win something, I would be like, oh, I kind of wish the other one had won. It was like I was impossible to make happy.
Hmm.
Which is weird normally. Normally I come into the Oscars kind of like a sports fan where there's like one movie that I want to see take everything.
Sure.
And I kind of thought that that was going to be Dune for me.
Uh-huh.
And I still really like Dune,
Yeah.
obviously, but I became sort of invested in all the different stuff. I became weirdly invested in the best actor, where like I honestly think that if Chalamet had won, then I would have felt bad for Adrian Brody. And as it was, Adrian Brody won, and then I felt bad for Chalamet. And I'm like, wow, what why am I making this so hard on myself? Just enjoy the show, Matt. But anyway,
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. I guess I'm just saying that to say, like, I actually was invested in multiple of the movies this year, and that's good, I think,
Hmm.
actually.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. Timmy's gonna be fine. Don't worry. He would have been the youngest actor to win Best Actor in history. So like he's got time. He's got time, Matt. He'll be
Yeah.
back. Uh, Brody's speech was interminable. It
Uh-huh.
was the longest best acceptance speech in the history of the Academy Awards, and like here's the thing I believe. I genuinely believe for the big awards, the bit like the big like centerpiece awards that in my mind is best actor, best actress, directing, and picture. They should get to talk as long as they want. That's what I believe. Like these are the most. Like, this is why we're here, right? This is the point of this whole thing.
Uh-huh.
Um, but man, it was not good. It was not.
Yeah.
Like he eventually got around to a point, I think, but it was very rambly. He's obviously very like bitter about the way the industry treated him. And he kind of billed this as his comeback tour. And I think that's very interesting for a man who is like now in a very, very exclusive club of having won 2 best actor Academy Awards.
Yeah. It's funny. I didn't know the subtext of him having some lingering resentment, although I can definitely hear that in the speech now that you mention it. For me, it was just the most like bland milk toast, kumbaya sort of like, I hope that we can all find peace type. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
cool. That's a good sentiment. But I think the movie that you made kind of says that, and you don't need to say it in a much more boring and dumb way.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I always appreciate a nice, short, to the point acceptance speech.
Yeah. I really, really loved um um oh my god. The supporting actor. The Culkin. What
Culkin,
was his first name?
yeah, the other Culkin, yeah,
Kieran. No, not Kieran. Kieran's the other one. Which Culkin is it? I can't remember.
I don't know.
Uh I'm looking it up. Oh, it is Kieran Culkin. I was
Okay,
right. Yeah. I really liked his speech. I feel bad for his wife because
yeah,
apparently there was like an interview where she said, like, actually, that made me feel really uncomfortable when you did that last year. And then he just does it again. But I feel like if you're married to Kieran Culkin, like, you just get to expect this type of stuff. That's just the type of person he
uh
is.
huh. I, I,
I
I
mean,
yeah, I found it. I found that to be like the most cringe moment of the night, which, compared to some Oscars, it's not nearly as cringe as we've had in the past. So not too bad.
mhm. Mikey Madsen, I think, had like one of the most genuine speeches because I think she was genuinely very surprised she won.
Hmm.
I think that was kind of the biggest surprise of the night. Actually, I think everyone, myself included, had kind of just made the assumption that Demi Moore was going to take it. It fit the narrative. It was like this victory tour. She had won everywhere except for the BAFTAs, and everyone really thought this was going to be her night, and it wasn't.
Hmm.
I think that says something about, I think the makeup of the Academy has changed dramatically over the past few years, but I also still think there's a lot of people out there that look at a film like The Substance and are just like, this is not an Oscar movie.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's probably what happened. Yeah.
yeah, but it's hard to be upset for Mikey Madsen, who absolutely killed Honora. Like, such a wonderful central performance that I absolutely loved. So
I,
very happy for her.
I think that's the key, is that she is the center of that movie in a way that Demi Moore is sort of half of the movie, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas Mikey Madsen, she is the core. She's the protagonist.
She's
She's
Honora.
everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I agree. Very happy for her. And yeah, I mean, I thought it was a good night. I think the Oscars did well. The ratings were actually very good. I think everyone was expecting the ratings to dip a little bit from last year because last year had the Barbie and Oppenheimer thing going for it. People were heavily invested in that and were going to be tuning in. The ratings actually went up by about 100,000 people this year.
Cool.
Which, if you're a type of person that's saying, okay, we put it on Hulu now, and so a lot more people are going to be engaged, it only going up by 100,000 is maybe concerning. But I think it's actually more than that. I think what we're seeing is the expected dip from people not caring as much this year, but then the it being on Hulu thing overcame that and surpassed it. Actually,
That makes sense.
I mean, it's still like, I mean, there's this kind of meme that exists out there that the Oscars aren't relevant anymore. I just like, almost 20 million people watched them on Sunday night, right? It's like, it is one of the biggest things that exists outside of live sports, specifically football. That's put on the television. So like, is it a mainstay of American culture anymore? No, but I still think it is remarkably popular, and that makes it important.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, I feel like this Oscars was the best one we've had in a few years. I'm going largely off vibes here,
Hmm.
but there were no weird upsetting things that happened. There's no like terrible story of some terrible thing that happened at the Oscars, which seems to happen way too often. So hey, good. I'll
Hmm.
take it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So that is the Academy Awards. We will kind of wrap up our coverage of it when we do watch I'm Still Here. We'll kind of decide, ultimately which was our favorite movie of the nominees. But we have one more to watch before we do that. But good show, good award,
Yeah,
liked it.
me too.
Congratulations, Sean Baker.
Yeah.
I do wonder, like, if they're doing with Denis Villeneuve what they did with Peter Jackson and Lord of the Rings, you know?
Hmm.
Ironically, Dune 2 won the exact same 2 awards that The Two Towers won.
That's funny.
So, um, I think the interesting thing here is that, I mean, we've talked about this before, but Dune Messiah is a very interesting story that I think Villeneuve is going to have to heavily edit to like bring this thing to a satisfying trilogy close. And if he pulls that off, maybe they will shower Villeneuve and Dune with all the awards like they did with The Return of the King and Peter Jackson. But if he sticks close to what that book is, I don't know.
Yeah. I so I'm restate my credentials as a Dune super fan. Like
Uh-huh.
I don't think we're doing the Peter Jackson thing because I think these are weird movies
Yeah.
that
No, that's fair.
he's not going for that sort of thing. Like there's my mental model of Villeneuve is that he's not at all surprised that he didn't win a boatload of Oscars, and not that he wouldn't like to, but he's just too much of an artist to care. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about Villeneuve, but I mean, I'm
Yeah.
definitely personally still excited about the potential of Dune Messiah. I'm just like,
Oh, certainly.
I don't think that's going to be the one where everybody's like, oh, this is the best one. I think it's going to be the weirdest one, and a lot of people are going to be off put by it, and it's not going to give you like some kind of um, catharsis and satisfaction like you get at the end of The Return of the King or whatever.
Sure. No, I think that's fair. Certainly. All right, but that was the Oscars. By the way, where they put Villeneuve in the audience was an insult. I don't know if you noticed.
I did not notice.
He's like halfway back in the middle.
It's hilarious.
It's like you're not winning. Go back there.
Yeah,
They put Demi Moore right up front. For like a long time. Jack Nicholson was always at the Oscars, and he always got like a spot like right in the front. And Demi Moore was in the Jack Nicholson spot. So like I think they really thought she was gonna win too, and like the camera cut to her quite a bit.
Yeah.
She handled it very well.
Yeah.
I think she was expecting to win as well. So
yeah,
it happens.
So just what you said a minute ago about there not being any stars, I felt like number one, you're right. Number two, they just showed the nominees a lot more. Like
There was no one else. Yeah.
They showed Timmy's face like 50 separate times, which is like, well, why wouldn't they? He's nominated for not only best actor, but he's in 2 movies that are both nominated for a ton of things. So he's sort of the man of the hour in many ways. So it's not like it's surprising. It's just like, yeah, well, he's like the only guy. He's the only guy you would show.
I mean, yeah, like obviously no respect to any of the other nominees or incredibly famous people that were there, but like when you think Oscars, you think like the superstars, like the ones that everyone knows, that everyone loves, and we didn't have as many of them this year. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right, that was the Oscars. It was fun. I'm glad I got to talk to you about it. I know I feel like I've been watching these myself and reporting back to you for the past 10 years, and now finally we got to actually have a conversation about it.
I knew I'd get around to it someday.
Doof. All right, Matt, let's go into our review of the week. Let's talk all about Gladiator II. Matt, what is this movie all about?
After his home is conquered by the tyrannical emperors who now lead Rome, Lucius is forced to enter the Colosseum and must look to his past and to find strength to return the glory of Rome to its people.
They just call him Lucius in the summary?
I guess so.
Spoilers.
Yeah, that is funny.
This movie is written by David Scarpa and Peter Craig. It is, of course, directed by Sir Ridley Scott, and it stars Paul Mescal, Denzel Washington, and Pedro Pascal. It is a sequel to 1999's 2000. It's a sequel to Gladiator with Russell Crowe. Matt, what'd you think of it?
It was okay.
All right, let's move on. No, this movie drove me kind of insane, actually. I agree with you. Like, it's it's just fine, and that actually pisses me off more than if it was bad,
Uh-huh.
because it's so desperately trying to be Gladiator 1 again, but it's like just a shitty version of it.
Yeah.
That, like, it's a movie that is, like, inviting you to compare every bit of it to the first movie, and it's worse in every way. I used this metaphor earlier, but it's like if you sent your mom to the grocery store to pick up some Fruit Loops for you, and she came back not with Fruit Loops, but with that, like, that off-brand bag cereal, like,
Uh-huh.
called Fruity Loopies or something,
Uh-huh.
and you're just like, "Oh."
Yeah.
That's what Gladiator 2 is. It's like it follows the same plot structure, the same like beats. Like it opens with a battle. There's two big battles in the Colosseum. One of them is a recreation of a fight that our hero's team was supposed to lose. Like it's the same. It's all the same.
Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of shots that are clearly homages to the first one,
Yeah, yeah.
and lines and direct references that felt very, like a sequel, like hamming it up. That was my least favorite stuff. I think the movie was at its most successful when it was deviating from the Gladiator formula. Like,
Hmm.
for
I
example,
can't believe there's a Gladiator formula. It was one movie.
yeah, right, and like exactly, because it doesn't really work as a thing that you're going to do a bunch of times.
Yeah,
Um, I actually, it's funny. There are all these memes about Denzel Washington in this movie, and how, but like I thought he was fine and like fun to watch, and I enjoyed his character.
I loved him. He's the only good part about the movie to me.
Yeah, he was good. I thought Pedro Pascal. I had to get. I kind of hate this about myself, but like I had to get past the fact that he's doing that voice, and I'm not sure why he was doing that voice.
Yeah, I
I
don't
think
know.
he just likes to do slightly off kilter voices for his characters.
Sure.
He like sees that as part of what acting is, which I guess that's fair, but that was weird to me. Um, he was fine. I think we both agree that the main actor, whose name is
Paul Mescal.
Paul Mescal, he he was he is not the right. It's not that he's a bad actor; it's that this is the wrong role for him, right?
Oh, absolutely. He's like I've watched him in other things, and he's great in them. So
Yeah,
like, yeah, I don't want to make this a critique of his overall ability as an actor, but it just has to be he's horribly miscast because it's real bad. And again, the other central problem is the movie is inviting you to compare him to Russell Crowe, who is an incredible actor. Who I think it was our review of Gladiator for the Deconstructing Scott series that you coined the Russell Crowe face acting term, and he's fantastic at it. And Paul Mescal is not
yeah,
at all. And I found myself completely indifferent to this character. Kind of honestly, like I found him impenetrable. Like I was like, who are you?
hmm
Like what? How am I supposed to feel here?
yeah,
Because like again, they go for the gladiator beat where like he sees his wife die at the very beginning, and so like he's originally motivated by just like blind revenge. Um, but then it's revealed, which I don't know how quickly into the movie you said, oh, that's he's gonna be Maximus's son. Because for me, it was the first 30 seconds of the movie.
no, it didn't occur to me until they basically tell us.
Oh, really? Like I looked at him and I said, oh, they're gonna make him Maximus's son. Okay. Um,
I I guess it was weird to me because I was like Maximus didn't have any other children except for the one that was killed. Okay, so let me like to be more clear. Like I didn't really see any subtext in Gladiator 1 that Lucius was supposed to be his son. And
See, I couldn't remember if there was or not. I thought there was like very, very deep subtext in like looks that he's exchanged that Maximus exchanges with Lucilla, that Lucius is his son, but I wasn't sure.
yeah,
It's been a while since I've
I
seen the movie.
it's possible that went over my head when I was 14. And then if I feel like sometimes if I miss something in a movie when I'm a kid, then maybe I just permanently miss it because I just have already decided that doesn't mean anything,
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
fair.
but I don't remember any subtext like that in that movie.
That's fair.
S- So I blame the script for this, by the way. I
Yeah.
mean, we can blame the acting, obviously, but I think here's the difference, right? Russell Crowe's character Maximus, very very clear motivation, very clear setup. He's this honorable man. He wants to go home. All he cares about is his family. His family is horribly murdered by this guy, and now he wants. Well, first he just despairs, and then when he realizes he could potentially get revenge, he wants to kill this guy. This is like a literal like 5-year-old child could understand like
Yeah.
the sketch of that character.
And his journey through the movie is learning that it's not just about revenge, that he can actually do something for the people of Rome.
Yes,
And like it's going from a tale of revenge to a tale of reinvigorating the dream that is Rome.
right. Like finding his honor again because he had
Yeah.
honor in the beginning.
Yeah.
So that's all beautiful. The problem is the script here. The problem is the story because the core element of this character is intentionally hidden from us.
Yeah.
Like yes, you can call it an acting problem, but it is the writing itself, the story itself is obscuring who is this guy? Who is this guy? Like we don't know where he's from. We don't necessarily need to know where he's from, but we need to know why he's doing what he's doing. And it just seems for most of the movie like he just sort of simply is real mad that his wife died, and he's real mad at Romans. But you don't buy like the connecting line between that and like he wants revenge on this specific general.
Mm-hmm.
He certainly, like, let me put it this way. You absolutely understood that Maximus was willing to die to get revenge on Commodus specifically.
Yeah.
You don't really buy that this guy desperately needs to get revenge on Pedro Pascal's character. It's like that
Well,
he was just the general. He was the guy who happened to be there, you know?
Exactly. That's the big problem here, is that like what happened to Maximus's family was Commodus sent men to his house and slaughtered them in their home.
Right.
Like yes, I am very sad that Hanno, or Paul Mescal's character, I'm very sad that his wife died, but she died in battle fighting an enemy. Like that's
Mhm.
a different kind of death. And yeah, like I understand you being mad at that and hating Rome for for invading your land, and then of course, as we learn later, hating Rome for more reasons. But yeah, it's such a much bigger logical leap to go to. I hate this general specifically because
Yeah.
of that.
And then he doesn't even really hate him that much because by the end of the movie he's like, "Ah, you're all right actually."
Yeah,
You
I really thought in their fight he was just going to kill him,
Yeah,
and
me too.
then like as he dies, Pedro Pascal was going to be like, "It's okay. Yeah, I understand your need.
Yeah.
Please." And then he begs him with his last breath, like, restore the glory that is Rome." Like
Uh-huh.
that's where I thought we were going, and no, we don't do that.
Yeah, because you didn't buy his decision at that point. I mean, I almost
Yeah,
feel like that's one of those like the script originally had that happening, and they were like, "No, that's too bad. That's too evil.
yeah.
He's supposed to be the hero." And it's like, is he? Is he supposed to be the hero? I don't
Well,
particularly think this guy is heroic.
this is the other great problem with the whole function of this script, Matt, is that Paul Mescal is a nepo baby prince of Rome
Uh-huh.
who was given everything he had. Like, yes, he suffered through after he was sent away by his mom. But his opponent, the antagonist of the movie, played by Denzel Washington, is a former slave that won his freedom and has built himself up, making constant moves to consolidate power around himself, to like create this world around him, to try to grab power and then destroy the corruption that is Rome, right?
Uh-huh.
Like Rome in his mind is this corrupt, evil thing that is beyond saving, and so he must destroy it. And like that's a fairly compelling story, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Much more compelling than uh Prince of Rome returning and being like, no, Rome's actually. I'm learning that Rome's actually good, actually.
Yeah.
Um, and so I want to save it, actually.
Uh-huh.
Especially so. Here's okay. this does not hurt Gladiator. Like am firmly of the belief that like stupid decisions in a sequel can never harm the original movie. But like Matt,
Uh-huh.
Maximus dies at the end of Gladiator. Spoilers.
Uh-huh.
And he dies saying, "Okay, now I know Lucius is safe, and Rome, the dream that is Rome, can exist again." And that's where we leave that character. And then fucking 30 seconds later,
Uh-huh.
Lucilla's like, "Actually, Lucius isn't safe. I need to send him away." And actually, Rome's still super in danger and gonna. It's like it does completely in the world of this movie specifically completely undermine everything that Maximus
Yeah.
stood and died for in the
Yeah.
first movie.
No, it's just like the Star Wars sequels where it's like, yay, we saved the Empire, we saved the world, dancing on the Ewok planet now. And then 5 years later, the Empire is back, and it's just exactly the same shit again.
Yeah.
That's exactly what that. Yeah, I totally agree. It's super annoying because you're like that, but that was. So we're just gonna keep doing this every few years. We're gonna have another big war, and
Right, and that ultimately undermines, I think, the message that underneath all this there is some core to Rome that is beautiful and right and just and worth saving. And like what the two movies put together have represented to us is like, no, actually, like, people die for that dream, but nothing good actually comes of it.
yeah. This is what always happens when we talk about Ridley Scott movies, all 40 of them, is if it was a good script, then we say, wow, this is one of the best movies ever made, because the script synergizes with Ridley Scott's genuinely genius filmmaking abilities, and it makes something fantastic and lasting, like Gladiator, which I think was sort of a collaborative project. We talked back then about how Gladiator, like the first script of Gladiator, was honestly probably a lot more like this movie in terms of being like a lot less soulful, a lot more Hollywood. And then if it's a bad script, we just complain about the story the entire time.
Yeah.
Which is what's happening now, because he just Ron Burgundy's the script. He just makes I don't understand how he chooses to make scripts, and he picks ones like this. I think this was salvageable, is what annoys me. Like you said earlier, it's even more infuriating when it's like a B- movie, and you really want it to be more. I think the script is salvageable. Like I feel like there are pieces of it where I'm like, this is nothing. This doesn't belong in this story. These two characters should be merged into one character. I don't care about this, so either remove it or make me care about it. Like, these are very basic screenwriting. Like it it just seemed half-assed and lazy, and like, okay, I guess we got to cash in on Gladiator. And like you said, it's so obviously just built on the skeleton of the Gladiators, the original Gladiator story, except again, not understanding why that story worked, and thus doing things like breaking the clear narrative arc of the protagonist and replacing it with a muddled one where you don't even find out who he is until halfway through the movie.
Yeah.
Just amateurish.
But this time, Matt, we don't have one pale, monstrous emperor. We have two.
Yeah. Oh, man. Breaking new ground.
I will say, when he named the monkey as first consul, I thought that was delightful.
Sure. Yes, I agree. There's like, I didn't even mind the creepy pale emperors. Like, I was like, this is great. Like, this is fun. This is it's kind of campy, but I don't really mind that. Just like I don't mind when, like, the gladiator fights probably weren't quite like that. Like, that's a so
yeah. So I mean, you said you don't want to blame, like, we blame the script. I do think, like, Ridley's direction kind of sucks here too. Like, I don't think any of the action sequences are particularly good in this movie. I don't think they're photographed well. Like, I don't find them propulsive or intriguing. Like, the action set pieces in Gladiator were great, and invigorating and thrilling and all the great things. And like the idea behind the, like, the big thing in the trailer was, we're going to do the thing where they flood the Colosseum and you're going to see a naval battle in the Colosseum. I thought that was so disappointing.
Yeah.
Like, I just like it was not shot well at all.
I feel like there was a huge over reliance on CGI, whereas
Yeah,
when the
yeah,
first movie came out, well, it would be totally wrong to say there was no CGI. There was actually the Coliseum itself was generally CGI, actually,
yes,
but like the CGI was not really used for the battles particularly, and you can really tell actually because like if you look at that first battle in Gladiator, you can kind of see the extras kind of doing the thing where they're kind of
yeah,
standing around. They don't really know what they're supposed to do. Like that to me just ends up being charming when you notice it, which you usually don't anyway.
hmm,
But this was like there were so many scenes where there were like way too many things happening. A huge amount of it is CGI, and you can tell it's CGI because it's like obscured with these clouds of dust that
yeah,
look fake because what they've done is done a half-assed job on the CGI and then covered it up with a bunch of CGI dust so that you can't tell. But it
yeah,
just looks awful, and it makes you feel like it's just a cheap movie. It's actually just I kind of forgot that Ridley Scott directed this because of how cheap it looked.
hmm,
There are some bits that I actually thought were cool, but they were far from the majority. Like I thought the initial assault on the city, the naval assault on the city, like it had some kind of just like shots that were just like, oh, that's a really cool shot.
yeah,
That's he understands what's cool about this. It's just a lot of it is like way too busy. There's too much happening, and the CGI is bad.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I think like even like geography of the scene and stuff like that that I think Ridley Scott is usually very good with because he storyboards so intensely. Like I just feel like thinking back to the naval battle, they do this like great maneuver where they maneuver around and manage to slice all the oars of the enemy ship off, right? Like they pull their oars out at the last minute. The enemy ship leaves its oars up. It's like great generaling from our main character, who, by the way, we have not been told like why he's good at this.
Hmm.
Actually, like Maximus was a general.
Hmm.
He was a well-respected general who was like really good at winning over and rousing men. Like I guess they tried to like yada yada that with Hanno, but I never felt it. Like I when all the gladiators like stand up to defend him and listen to him, I just was like, why
Right.
though? But that's besides the point. Anyway, like so they do this great maneuver. They cut through the oars, and I'm like, oh, we're doing like real naval battle stuff here. Like now they have a mobility advantage over this other thing. And I guess you kind of see it in the fact that they then ram them, but you just never really felt it. Like the movie never
Hmm.
stops to like demonstrate what that did to the other ship's maneuverability. It just kind of seems like it's chaos and there's no like I think an important part of action is this kind of cause and effect chain, right? Like where
Hmm.
you can see from the beginning of the set piece to the end of the set piece how things play out where each item leads to the next, each battle, each piece leads to the next to ultimately get victory. And I felt this one didn't have that. I feel the same way about the rhino one, by the way.
Yeah.
Like it was cool seeing like a giant rhino charging people, but I was just like, there's also one moment where the rhino charges and Paul Mescal goes flying,
Yeah.
and I'm like, did it hit him?
It.
Because like, wouldn't
Yeah.
that hurt?
He's fine. Yeah. Yeah. That bothered me so much because it's set up where he's cleverly tricked it, but then it hits him anyway, and he goes flying through the air and like lands on the ground. Then he just like gets up and he's fine. To me. I hate that this kind of stuff bothers me, but it does. It just like the action, like the specific like hand to hand combat action was atrociously bad. Um, like there were so many times that people would be punching each other, and you would very clearly see that the punch was pulled,
Yeah.
or that the thing is typical stage fight acting where you take the hit by turning your face with the hit, but obviously you turn your face before the hit actually arrives because you don't actually get a hit in the face. But
Yeah.
normally you put the camera in the right place so that it's less obvious that that's happening,
Yeah.
and you practice doing it a bunch of times, and you get they just weren't good at it.
Yeah.
There were so many parts where there were so many times. I honestly, I was just like, it was like it practically ruined the movie for me. How often, either with punching or with swords, it's actually kind of worse with swords because you'd have somebody with a gladius, like like kind of like do the badass action thing where they like wade through a bunch of enemies and they like slash back and forth and the enemies just like fall down and they're dead. And it's like that's not how swords work. First of all, a gladius is it has an edge, but it's more of a stabbing weapon anyway. And I'm
Hmm.
not just being a nerd here. Like you can't like physically. I can see that you weren't swinging that with any power. So you
Hmm.
just like at worst you like tap the guy on the back on his shoulder with this sword,
Yeah.
and then he just dies. It's like that's not how that works. Like contrast that with literally everything in the first movie, where like if somebody was going to die, it's because they got like horribly impaled, and like you're like, yeah, that person's dead. I believe that
Hmm.
they're dead now. Um, it was very like Hollywood action tropey fighting in contrast to really like very grounded, brutal, like kind of unpleasantly brutal fighting in Gladiator.
Yeah.
I want to just, I know I'm going on, but I want to emphasize that like Gladiator had like grotesquely brutal, realistic violence. That was like the selling point of it is like, oh, you want to see violence? You like, are you not entertained? Right? We're gonna have gore. It's going to be a gore fest, right? And then
Yeah.
this is almost just a stupid action movie compared
Yeah,
to
I mean,
that.
I think we talked about this when we talked about Gladiator, that we really felt that like part of what the movie was doing was critiquing us
Hmm.
for liking this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
In the same way that like we could look at the Romans with disgust for cheering on this kind of staged violence. But like that isn't that what we're doing too? And I think that that was very much the conversation the movie wanted to have. This movie, yeah, is not interested in having that conversation at all. I,
yeah.
to be uncharitable for a little second here, Ridley Scott is 87 years old.
Uh-huh.
How much of this movie did he actually direct? You know,
Yeah.
like and I don't mean like was he in charge of the decision making? I certainly think he was, but like how much of this movie was he like on the set on the day versus how much he relied on his ads for especially the action sequences? Because like that's honestly what it feels like to me. And like I'm not saying like Ridley Scott is this perfect director who's never done anything wrong, and so he couldn't have possibly staged this action sequence as bad as it is. He's very capable of doing that. We've seen it in some of his movies, but like he's 80 fucking 7.
Yeah. He was born in 1937. So I think you're right. I mean, it just didn't feel like his hand or his eye. You know,
Yeah.
there's relatively few shots that had that kind of beauty that I
Hmm.
associate with really even the movies of his that we didn't particularly love.
Yeah.
Um, I can think of so many of the movies we talked about where it was like, wow, this was stupid, but like, remember that one shot? Where,
Yeah.
like his mastery of lighting and composition and just every facet of this stuff. Yeah, it just wasn't there. The only like, funnily enough, one of the only sequences that I thought felt sort of Ridley Scott was like when Denzel Washington goes to the guy's house and is like, "This is my house now." Like
Yeah.
there was
Oh
something
my
that felt
god.
Ridley Scott about the composition of those shots and like the lighting, the sort of soft lighting.
Yeah.
And it like I don't know that was that scene to me sort of jumped out from the movie that was surrounding it as like, oh, this is great. This is a great scene.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I think Ridley Scott made sure he was there that every day of Denzel Washington's shoot.
Hmm.
Just because I think he really likes Denzel Washington.
Hmm.
And also it feels like that in the movie. I mean, yes, let's give as much credit to Denzel as possible. Like one of my favorite actors, remarkable guy, so good in this movie. The le- politics. Like the greatest line delivery of the word politics that has ever existed in the world. He's having a wonderful time. Like even just like his when he like grabs up his toga and walks out of a room, it's like Denzel is enjoying
Yeah.
himself. But yeah, that you're right. That's my favorite scene in the movie where he goes to the senator and basically threatens him.
Mhm.
It's really, really good.
Yeah, and he's like they're like putting their hands on each other in a
Yeah.
yeah, it's different, right? It's different from everything else in the movie. That I think
Yep.
that's a bunch of stuff about it strikes me as being different, more artistic, more elevated. And then, like I said, the movie surrounding it is so paint by numbers.
Yeah. I have a question for you.
Uh-huh.
Did Lucius want everyone to know he was Lucius? This is part of the impenetrable, confusing part of the character for me.
I mean, at first I think he didn't. And then his mom comes and calls him out, and I think he knows that he can't successfully pretend that he's not Lucius. So he obliquely admits it,
Yeah.
and then past that point, like it's not that the movie is total garbage, right? It's not like it's like, oh, I have no idea. It's like, no, I'm pretty sure he just comes to understand the virtues of like honor and the dream that Marcus Aurelius and then Maximus were fighting for, and sees some glimmer of that and feels that uh, even the general who he thought was the villain, it's not actually him. It's actually the emperor, and he can do something about this. He can meaningfully do something about this. And then it becomes understandable that he would reveal now that he is Lucius. But I think prior to that sort of series of revelations, I think he had no interest in taking on that identity.
I completely agree. Why is he quoting Virgil in in a Roman's house?
Because it's cool. Because it's a cool scene.
And then he gets into the gladiator arena, and all this is before he's confronted by his mother, and he picks up dirt like Maximus did.
Uh-huh.
And it's like this would be like if LeBron James does this thing where he takes like the chalk every day, every game, he takes like the grip chalk, and he throws it up into the air right before the game starts. It's like his signature. He's done it his entire career. It would be like everyone in the audience would immediately know like that's the Maximus move, because
Uh-huh.
everyone loved Maximus. And it's just like here's what it feels like to me. It feels like clunky script stuff, right? Where like we need a reason for Lucilla to like look and see him and be like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
could that be my son? And like and so like we have to do this thing. Well, it's like he's not acting normal. Like he knows about Romulus and Remus, and he's quoting Virgil, and he's doing the dirt thing, and like these are all like things that they needed to happen to have characters make realizations, but they didn't know how to make them happen naturally. So it's just like, and then Hanno quotes Virgil now, and you're just like,
Yeah.
why is he doing that?
I'm actually coming around to this opinion that like having a quote unquote mysterious protagonist is just a mistake. Like there's very, very, very few places in storytelling where you want to have a mysterious protagonist. You
Mm-hmm.
want the audience to be in on who the protagonist is. Like I know it would be a different story, but imagine how much more invested we would be in this character if we knew from the beginning that he was Lucius. And
Yeah.
he has this secret. Now we know that. We're on his side. We're watching him take these actions. And then when he quotes Virgil, instead of being like, what the hell? We're like, oh, he why is he doing that? Does he want to be found out? Like you're asking meaningful questions instead of just being like, okay, he's crazy, I guess. He's a wacky guy.
Yeah. I think you're
Um
right. I think you're right.
yeah, it's I don't know. I don't like the scripts. I don't like this I think maybe stuff like him doing the dirt on the hands thing would maybe have played better if the movie were overall a little bit less constantly paying homage to Gladiator 1, because
Yeah.
I think the way I just interpreted that, I think I slightly interpreted it different than you, is I'm like, I don't even think of that like as a Watsonian choice. I think of that as a Doyleistic choice to do yet another Gladiator reference. but you're right that it's like, well, within the story, Lucius saw Maximus do that when he was a child, and he thinks that's what you're supposed to do before a fight because he saw a gladiator do it when he was a kid. Um, so like it's not. I'm not saying it doesn't make sense. I'm saying that the reason they did it is because it's from the first movie, um, which is why everything in this movie happens. I think that my least favorite aspect was when they would just show scenes from Gladiator 1,
Yeah.
and then you're reminded of a much better movie, and then you just wish you had watched that movie instead. That's
Yeah, I agree. Like this, I mean, this is the problem. Like, I would feel much worse about constantly comparing it to Gladiator if the movie didn't consistently invite me to make those comparisons. And yeah, especially like even from like color grading and like camera technique, when you just cut to a scene from Gladiator, just like, oh, this movie looks a lot better actually.
uh-huh.
I just want to watch that movie.
Yeah. Which is isn't it just embarrassing that like a movie made 25 years later looks worse?
Yeah, 100%.
Like we definitely have better technology for every aspect of the filmmaking process.
Yeah.
Yeah, so oh well.
Yeah, it's disappointing. So okay. Um we did not rank all of the Ridley Scott movies because we thought that would be an exercise in absurdity, to rank 35, 40 movies from worst to best. What we did, Matt, is we kind of tiered them. So we have a C tier, B tier, and A tier films, and then we do have our top 5 movies, which, as a reminder, those are Blade Runner, Thelma and Louise, The Martian, Gladiator, and Alien as our number 1. So how are you feeling right now about Gladiator 2? I think A tier is probably out based on the tenor of our conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I'm just going to remind people like sort of a rough sampling. We put in C tier Prometheus and Robin Hood and House of Gucci, which is
Yeah.
kind of funny in retrospect. We put in B tier GI Jane, Hannibal, Black Hawk Down. I'm thinking high C, low B. Kind of. If I think about the stuff that I enjoyed about this movie, and I compare it with like I think this movie might have been a better movie than White Squall, and I think it was. I think it's probably a better movie than any of these C tier movies. So I guess I'm inclined to put it like at the bottom of B. That's kind of what I'm feeling right now. What do you think?
I feel that's right. I mean, I do agree with you generally when I look through these C tier films. Like, these are all big stinkers. And then, like, is this movie bad? No, it's not bad. It's just annoyingly mediocre.
Yeah.
So I think low B tier works for me because I agree. Like, maybe it's better than White Squall. Like, I look at a movie like Black Hawk Down, though, or A Good Year, which is another Russell Crowe film that we really, really enjoyed. And it's like, those movies worked.
Yeah.
Like, they just weren't great. And so I don't want to put it above those movies because I feel a lot of this
Right.
movie doesn't work. So
This movie is exactly on par with The Counselor.
that's perfect. I agree. All right, so low B tier works for me. Gladiator 2.
All right.
It occurs to me as we have this conversation that we are still missing one Ridley Scott movie because neither of us have watched the Joaquin Phoenix Napoleon film still.
Oh my God. Yeah, you're right. Okay, we'll do that.
We do need to get around to that. Ultimately, Matt, like as we said, Ridley Scott is 87 years old. Like, it's great that he's still working, and I hope he lives to 120, but he's probably not. And so like we're getting to the point now where like every new movie could be his last movie.
Yeah.
And like that is also one of the things that bums me out about this. In a world where Ridley Scott only has maybe 2-3 movies left in his life, this is the one? Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I feel complicated about he's just such an interesting artist because he's made so many damn movies.
Yeah.
And so many of like half of them have been not very good according to us. So
Although I look at I look at his upcoming credits on IMDb, and he's apparently got 1, 2, 3, 4 films in pre-production right
No,
now. So,
he'll never stop.
my God, can you imagine at 87? No way. I'm
Yeah,
getting tired just thinking of it.
me too.
All right, so that is Gladiator 2 and Ridley Scott. We will eventually watch Napoleon, probably the director's cut, I guess, since we have that option.
Yeah, cool.
I have no idea what to expect with that movie. So,
Me either.
I know it didn't like win all the awards, so we'll see.
Do 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 doof.
Matt, before we go, we got to talk about Severance.
Let's do it.
Holy crap. Do we have to talk about Severance? So Severance season 2 episode 7, Chikai, is that how you pronounce that name?
I thought I heard people saying like cheeky Bardo, and I'm like, it's not.
That feels like that's not right.
That's not how it's spelled. So Chikai Bardo is how I'm going to choose to say it for
Bardo,
this conversation.
Chikai Bardo, one of the most surprising, devastating, and delightful episodes of TV I've watched in quite a while. What'd you think of it?
What you just said. One of the greatest episodes of television I can remember ever watching. I think my first comment after it was like, wow, that was a great movie. It's a 50-minute episode of TV that feels like one of the best movies you've seen in a while.
Yeah.
It's just like beautiful artistry. I could see why this season cost so much money, because just think about like how complex some of this was. They had there's like fractal artistry where you've got all these locations that they create for like the relatively recent past, or the place where Mark and Gemma meet.
Mm-hmm.
And they continue to do this amazing thing where you can't tell if it's supposed to be the 60s, 70s, or 80s, So it's vaguely like, yeah, well, it's clearly the past of whatever world we're in the main, in the current timeline of Severance, but it's like a weird, vague alternate history past. And I love that so much. Like, it's because you're like that it's so visually compelling, but not specific. Like, I love that, they're never working on computers. They're always working on typewriters,
Yeah.
Even down to the clothes they wear. It's like, that's kind of what people were wearing in the 70s and 80s, but not really.
Yeah.
I love the, the visual. I think like the visual side of the story is one thing that really captivated me. And that's probably why I'm talking about it right now. But like, then of course there's just the whole dramatic impact of the story, which is incredibly good.
Yeah.
Just perfect.
I mean, this episode was directed by a woman named Jessica Lee Gagne, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
She is a cinematographer. She's been a cinematographer for Severance, has been in the DP on several episodes of the show. But this was her directorial debut. This was the first thing she has ever directed in her life. And holy shit, man.
Uh-huh.
I agree with you. Like, just visually, this is stunning. I mean, like, we get so clear on like a look that is Severance. And I loved the testing floor and how the testing floor, like, we're used to the severed floor as having like very clear geometry to it, and the testing floor, well, just as like white, it feels totally different because it's like honeycombed almost.
Yeah.
And also, I noticed like the lighting on the severed floor all comes from above. The lighting on the testing floor is all floor lighting, which is a great touch. So yeah, just like little stuff like that. And then, yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. Like, it feels like when we're seeing shots from the past that they almost take place in a different world, because everything we've seen on the exterior during the course of Severance has been in winter, in cold. It's cold and snowy and desolate, and everything in this is it feels like springtime. It's sunny, it's happy, and then of course that slowly goes away over the course of the episode. But just remarkable filmmaking. Like,
yeah.
I was bowled over.
Totally agree with your comments about the light. Like, the light is such an incredibly important part of and symbol in this episode specifically. I noticed, like you just said, you have like this golden warm summer light in the first parts of the episode, and then really the first time we ever see like pleasant yellow light in the main timeline is the very end of the episode when Mark wakes up from his horrible brain damage,
Hmm.
and his sister is there, and we see like actually pleasant warm yellow light on his face as he wakes up to the new day, which contrasts with the last we saw of him in the past, where he sees the police come to his door and he backs away from the door, and the shadow creeps up his or creeps down or creeps up. I don't remember the geometry, to cover his face, and it's symbolic, right?
Yeah.
He backed away into shadow, which is the most Mark thing in the world, where he retreats. He always retreats from pain,
Hmm.
and he hides in his work or in severing himself. And now we see him being reborn, with the symbol of the light. It's beautiful. It works so well. Love it.
Yeah. I mean, everything with Gemma and the testing floor too, I found so absolutely intriguing. Like, it's funny because we had all these conversations about like what thing would you want to sever? Like, what experience in your life would you want to just cut that out? And we got to see them in the testing floor, right? Like plane rides, dentist trips, office, writing thank you notes for Christmas. Yes, please, can I have that?
Hmm.
But the existential nightmare that would be having to exist in that life. So to be clear here, like my vibe from the episode was that the version of Gemma that walks into those different testing rooms is a different person each room.
Yeah,
Is that what you got?
yeah. I think that the one who is getting her teeth cleaned is always getting her teeth cleaned. That
Yeah.
is her entire existence.
Yep, and the one who's writing thank you notes is always that, the one who's on a plane, and yeah, yeah. I agree. That's horrific and nightmarish. And I mean, one of the things I definitely want to talk to you about here is like, so what are we doing? So,
Yeah,
I mean, there's the clear obvious thing to me is that Lumen is testing this whole severed process and trying to see, it wants to sell Severance to people as a way to escape the bad parts of life that you don't want to deal with, right? Like that that's testing all those unfavorable things, and of course the OG of this is work. You don't want to deal with work, but yeah, all these other things as well. We've already seen it with childbirth. They want to sell this as a service to do all these things, and they're testing how a person is reacting to this, how a person is how if those memories are bleeding through, if they're transferring through. The question then becomes, what the fuck is Cold Harbor, and why is this the culmination of everything?
yeah. And I am sort of delighted that I don't have a very good answer. But there's a lot for us to chew on. Like
Yes.
there's the simple fact that the refiners are sorting through her. Okay, a lot of this is making leaps of logic, right? But it seems like the refiners are like sorting through her experiences of these different rooms and sorting those experiences into the four different lumen Kier uh,
The
tempers.
tempers, yeah, yeah.
And for some reason, right? Like they're not the refining is implied to be extremely important, and the lumen people actually believe this to be true. So they're determining, they're sorting, they're refining something. Are they refining those experiences? Are they coming to a better understanding of the nature of these four tempers to some particular end? um I was talking to somebody the other day, and the idea came up. So I've heard a lot of theory crafting around the idea that Cold Harbor is like some terrible thing, and the idea came up in this conversation, like, well, maybe Cold Harbor is like some sort of beautiful thing, and it's like
Hmm.
it's like a refined experience of sort of like perfection, where as long as you're in that room, you're experiencing this perfection, and then you leave the room, you go back to your normal life, and so basically the being that lives in that room is only experiencing that perfection, whatever that looks like. I'm not even saying I think that's correct. It's just interesting that the story that we've been told allows such a breadth of interpretations.
Yeah.
Do you have any like favorite, where do you think? I can't even answer the question of where are we going, but like, do you have an idea? Do you have ideas?
Where we're going, I don't know, because I still do. I mean, I think your guess as to what the micro data refinement people are actually doing is a good one, but I still don't have any idea what Mark is doing has anything to do with these rooms, because I don't understand. Like, because she hasn't been in Cold Harbor yet, so like
Yeah.
he can't be refining her experiences in Cold Harbor. I mean, is he? We've been led to believe he's refining her specifically,
Hmm.
right? But then what are all the other people on the floor doing? I mean, maybe there's just multiple testers, right? That's very possible. But uh, what I look at is the title of the episode, which is Chikai Bardo.
Hmm.
And a bardo is essentially like it's not. It's hard to explain, but it's essentially like a purgatory of sorts. Um, it is a place that you go upon death, to like to hang out before you're ready for rebirth.
Hmm.
Um, in like Tibetan mythology, um, and like I think the best spoilers for Lost, by the way, everyone, but the best example of a bardo is the flash sideways in the final season of Lost, because essentially all these people are there, they don't know they're dead, they're meeting people from their lives there's no concept of time there, right? So they're meeting people, all these people have died at separate times, at different times, some before you died, some after you died, but they're all meeting together at the same time. Part of your process through the bardo is discovering that you are dead, and doing some kind of amends making to allow you to like move on to either a higher player existence or to rebirth or something like that. So is that, are we saying with the idea of a bardo that Gemma is sort of in a bardo right now, in that like the testing floor is essentially her bardo? Or are we trying to say, because like one of the theories that I've seen, and this is not an original thought of mine, but like is that if you're creating this lumen that wants to cut all the bad experiences of life out for you, like wouldn't death be like a big one? Like,
Hmm.
what if you can sell the service to a person that just says you don't have to experience death anymore? Um, like you don't like the final moments of death, the fear of death, any of this stuff. You don't have to experience that. Someone else, some other version of you can do that for you. Um, and then maybe even there's like some cloning shit going on. So that severed version of you can experience death, and then you get to be reborn, rebirthed in a new version of you or something. Um, that seems plausible.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Sure. I think the idea of rebirth is interesting. I was also thinking about the fact that like the first episode is actually called "Good News About Hell," and the third episode is actually called "In Perpetuity." So like these are several different references to like the afterlife, basically.
Yeah,
So the idea of severance as being connected to the afterlife, I think, is interesting. I've
yeah.
also, for some reason, always had this back of my mind theory that like what they're really trying to do is like resurrect Kier.
Either
Um,
resurrect Kier Egan or achieve immortality for whatever Egan is alive right now. I forget his name, but
yeah,
Helena's father.
some kind of apotheosis, and it may be weirder than than anyone is imagining at this point, because
Yeah,
I've I think I've totally retired the idea that like the board is a bunch of uploaded minds I'm just like, that's just not. I think there was a chance, many episodes ago, it was on the table that that was the kind of science fiction world we're in. It's just really clear now that this is not the kind of science fiction world that we're in.
sure.
We're not doing that. I would be very surprised if we did that, is what I'll say. uh, but maybe some other weirder kind of rebirth is possible. Like
Yeah.
for example, you achieve that rebirth by sort of doing the perfect balancing of the tempers in an individual, and then maybe in their sort of, metaphysics, like that's a kind of perfect being, that person sort of becomes the new like Kier avatar.
Yeah.
Again, I'm so over my skis here, but like these are part of the problem is we don't really understand like the metaphysics of like what exactly do the Kier people actually believe.
Yeah.
um
And
yeah.
I think that's intentional. And I think like the a testament to the show is that all this stuff works without us knowing any of that. And
Hmm.
and I think it's because at its core, like the reason why this is one of the best episodes I've ever seen is not because I'm asking questions about is Gemma in a Bardo.
Yeah.
It's because what I'm asking or what I'm worried about is I want Mark to get Gemma. And like I grow to understand their relationship. And we get to see in a kind of Pixar's Uppian like sequence of events the beginning of their relationship and the trials and tribulations of their relationship that eventually led to her death. Which let's state this here because you and I have already talked about this and I know we're kind of on the same page here. To me, it was heavily implied in the final moments where Gemma says goodbye to Mark that she knew she was leaving, like not just going out for the night, but like was about to hook up with Lumen and agree. I think she agreed originally to this thing, to the
Yeah.
testing thing. Whatever I don't know what they promised her. Maybe it's something to do with a baby or something. But I
Yeah.
think she agreed to this originally, and now, of course, has changed her mind after experiencing the horrors of it. And they're keeping her their prisoner essentially. But I got that in the subtext of her goodbye to Mark,
Yeah.
and I know you agree with that.
Yep. Yep. Just to say it here. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I feel like we have set up a twist of, Mark, one or both Marks finding out that this was a choice that she made, and how is Mark going to react to that? Obviously, I think it's pretty clear she didn't know exactly what she was signing up for. Basically,
Sure.
just created a situation where, there's other stuff we haven't talked about. Like she seems to have been selected. Like her and Mark were possibly put together intentionally by the Lumen people.
Yeah,
Um,
every bit of their lives is threaded with Lumen.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. The fertility clinic is a Lumen fertility clinic. The
Yeah, and the
doctor,
doctor is there. What's his name?
yeah, I don't know.
He's
Yeah,
and
but
then when
yeah,
they give blood, that's a Lumen blood drive,
right.
right? So
So they're surrounded by this. How much of it is explicitly controlled versus how much of it is like Lumen sort of identifies her as someone who is useful for some reason that we're not sure about. Maybe it was literally like they drew her blood and determined she was compatible for something. Who knows what? Or,
yeah,
or maybe it's more sort of abstract than that. Um, but in any case, yeah, I think I agree with you that she probably knew she was leaving, but didn't know that she was going to be kept away for years. Actually, we
yeah.
don't even know. I mean, do we know? Did they ever tell us how long Jim has been?
I feel
What?
like it's been over a year, but
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
yeah, that seems right.
And, yeah, and one thing, like he identified the body, right?
Right.
Like this wasn't a like, no, she was in a car crash and they just swept her away. So like this is also why I think there's some weird cloning stuff happening here because like she's dead. Like he saw her body. He said, "Yes, that's my wife." Um, so I have no idea what that means, but like
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't know about that. Um, there's a lot of stuff I don't know about, but that's fine. I really, it was just a beautiful tone poem of an episode, setting aside
Yes,
all the
yes,
mysteries and questions. Like the visuals, the story of it. So much of the story is conducted, just visually, where there's really, 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 relatively little dialogue.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
tells us what's happening. It's all we're being shown things and we're inferring things.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
I am very fortunate enough that my wife and I have never had to deal with the fertility issue, but I like know plenty of people who have, right? This is a very common experience with couples struggling to get pregnant that want to get pregnant. So I just it's a very relatable thing. It's heartbreaking um seeing like what that does to a marriage, the stressors on a relationship that can put. Um it's rough. It's rough
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess one interesting thing about all of that is that I don't think it was really ever foreshadowed. Like the idea that prior to Gemma disappearing, that they were having fertility problems, and then
I think
Mark.
someone asked him at one point, and Mark just kind of like casually is like, "Yeah, we tried." Like
Mhm. See, I
something
don't
like
even
that.
remember that.
Yeah.
And I think I think actually, yeah, somebody pointed out that like this kind of might explain some of his weird behavior around Devin's pregnancy and childbirth.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, because he would have some hangups about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. I've heard a lot of interesting like reactions where some people are like, "Oh, this episode makes Mark look terrible," and I'm like, I mean, he definitely is not. He's not handling it super gracefully,
No.
but I think like both of them are in a lot of pain. And Mark's way of dealing with pain is to like close up and withdraw, and we've seen
Yep.
that over and over and over throughout the show. And he's doing that here, and I think he is probably starting to drink too much even here. I think that was maybe one surprise, is that it's not that Gemma died and he started drinking. It's maybe he was already drinking a little bit too much
Yeah. Yeah.
toward that. Yeah, even before then.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I think we knew. Like, I think he tells. I can't remember if it's like the woman he goes on a date with in the first season that he tells like he made some mistakes with his wife. Like, and that I mean that is I think part of his guilt, right? Like that's the beauty and the tragedy of that final scene, right? Where like she basically says to him, "You sure you want me to go? Like, I can stay. I don't have to go. I can stay here." And he's like, "No, no, no, go."
Mhm.
Um, I'm sure like there's a lot of guilt wrapped up in that. If I had been a better husband, a more attentive husband, she wouldn't have even gone that day. I would have kept her there. Also, there's the tragedy of her having to say "I love you" twice to him
Mhm.
in the last moments he talks to her, beautifully and cruelly repeated in the testing floor by stupid Dr. Maurer. There's a lot of so this is one Severance question I have for you. There's a lot of echoing in not only this episode but Severance in general. Like it echoes lines, it echoes scenes sometimes. Like uh, Gemma sitting on the floor in the shower crying after her miscarriage is very similar to a Helly when she was curled up on the ground crying. Like so like my question is this like a external for us kind of echoing, or is some of this echoing meant to represent like conscious efforts within the world of the show to echo things on the outside?
I think the latter in some cases, like the doctor saying "I love you" and forcing her to say it, to me felt like a thing where they had found out about that somehow, and then they were like using that as a kind of psychological, not just torture. Torture implies that the point is just to make her suffer. Like they're trying to do something specific to her mind,
Yeah.
especially with these different rooms. They're trying to like create a certain mental state in each room, like a sort of pure version of the mental state. And like that's, to me, I'm always wondering. I kind of keep returning back to this idea of what does refining mean. The word refining is such a precise word to me, and I'm like, is each of the rooms like a perfectly refined essence of a type of human experience? And they that's what they want. They want that for some reason. They want
Hmm.
uh why? What are they doing with it? I'm not sure. I said a second ago that like the idea of brain of brain uploads is off the table. And I said it so confidently, which is funny because I'm like, well, this is a world that has brain chips. The idea
Sure.
of literal Kier Egan like 100 years ago having a brain chip does seem implausible, but like we have brain chips. They were really invested in getting Petey's brain chip back, and the reason why was never explained to us.
Hmm.
What why do they want that chip? Why was it worth um, Miss Cobell going to such risk to get that chip back?
Yeah.
Um,
It's
so
interesting that we know Severance has been a thing for like 12 years now, but
mhm,
sometimes when they talk about it, they talk about how like they're still in like beta with a lot of
mhm,
this technology. Like even I think it's when we get that wonderful scene of the room of four people that are, I guess, each observing their own macro data refinement person, they're talking about is like, yes, the chip's working. Like, and it's like, well, what's going on here, right?
mhm.
Because Severance has been a thing for a decade. What do you mean it's the chip's working?
Yeah,
Shouldn't you know that by now?
I think my interpretation of that is it has gotten better and better over time. So
Sure.
so I go back to the first episode or two where they're asking Helly the questions, and these are clearly the questions they ask every new Severed employee, and basically they're testing like, okay, you seem to have like excellent memory of facts of a certain type,
Hmm.
but no episodic memory whatsoever. Like
Yeah.
you don't remember ever seeing the sky, but you know what a sky is abstractly,
Yeah.
and it's like a perfect score is when you answer all of the questions right, or you can't answer them depending on on what's expected. And I feel like maybe that's like something they've been perfecting over time. Maybe at first the severance was just imperfect and there was more leakage. I don't trust these people to have gotten anything right the first time just due to the way they operate. That's my feeling about that.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense to me. Um, and maybe this is like the first time they've really been able to test, like, because I definitely think, well, this is interesting, right? Because there's a lot of stuff Miss Cobell was doing in the first season that the show made me think she was kind of doing outside of the direction of Lumen and acting on her own, like getting the scented candle in there, forcing Miss Casey and Mark to interact and like observing. But the more and more to me, it just feels like maybe that was just part of what they were doing, is
Uh,
testing the two of them and how that interaction, like what is leaking through
yeah,
or not leaking through.
yeah, because definitely the whole idea that she even goes up onto the severed floor to interact with Mark is a huge risk, and seems to imply that there's a huge need to do that. Like they
Yeah.
actually need to do that. It's not just a lark. Like because they have her go between all these rooms. That's fine. She's totally sequestered away from everyone else. But then you go have her literally interact with her husband for extended periods.
Yeah.
So they're definitely testing that. And yeah, I think you're right that yeah, I mean it's funny like vibes wise, I agree with you that Cobell has like her own agenda. Um Almost like she's such a zealot that Lumen is like insufficiently dedicated to being Lumen,
Yeah.
That's kind of the vibe you get from her.
Sure.
So that's kind of how I interpreted her actions.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know. I was thinking about this earlier this week. Like we have seen so little of Miss Cobell in this season,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Um, this is episode 7. We've got 3 more until the finale, and I kind of figured she would be a much bigger presence in the show. Maybe that's coming up still, but just a weird thing to note. I don't know, and like I continue to be delighted by the fact that I just don't know where the show is going to go from here. Every time I finish an episode, I just
yeah,
don't know. Like I would have never predicted this. I did predict we'd get to see the testing floor eventually, and I might have even predicted like some of what the testing floor means, but never quite like this. And I just didn't expect an episode like this. And yeah, I mean, at the very core of it is this beautifully tragic, wonderful love story, that moved me. It
yeah,
did.
yeah. Me too. I mean, one interesting fact that you sort of forget soon after you watch the episode is just like we really had no idea who Gemma was.
Yeah.
She was a phantom. She was Mark's wife, but we knew Miss Casey, but we also understood that Miss Casey is not Gemma.
Yeah.
And so this is effectively the first time we've met and gotten to know Gemma, and I'm sort of delighted to find that she's her own highly distinct, interesting, likable character.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah, right.
She broke what's his name's fingers, tried to escape.
Yeah,
Oh, that escape sequence, by the way, was so fucking tragic. When
yeah,
she makes it, she gets out, and then immediately turns into Miss Casey and is sent back down.
yeah.
That's ugh.
I love it. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the show rightly realized that as we got closer and closer to perhaps Mark and Gemma being reunited, we at some point we needed to transition from caring about Gemma solely because Mark cared about her to just caring about Gemma. And I think the show smartly recognized we needed to do that, and this was their method of allowing us to form attachment and emotions to Gemma as a person, not just a concept. And it worked. It certainly worked on me. I think my favorite part of the scene might of the show might be just the four of them having lunch one day.
Mhm.
Devin, Gemma, Rickon, and Mark. I
Yeah,
loved that scene. I loved that scene so much. I loved the way Gemma tells Devin that she's pregnant, and like that silent realization they have between them, which just like it does so much work to show exactly how close they were, because like we're told, right, like Devin says to Mark, I'm grieving her too, like we were very close. These are things we conceptually knew, but in that moment you felt it.
yeah. Yeah, it makes Mark seem like even more of an asshole for dismissing Devin's earnest friendship with Gemma. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. You did feel it. You did. Devin comes looking amazing out of this episode.
Yeah,
Uh,
she does.
just being this fantastically supportive sister, trying to save Mark's life, while Doctor Ragabi is like just being increasingly erratic and sinister. Um,
I'm almost at my wit's end with the Ragavi stuff. Like I just don't know what to do with her at
yeah,
all. Like
yeah,
am I yeah, is that stuff sinister? Like there's a read of her immediately saying I'm fucking out of here the second you call Cobell. That's like, oh, she's just the smartest person in the room actually.
right.
And that's a fair read, but I don't know if that's the right read, and I feel like she's so clouded in mystery that I just have nothing to grab onto, and so I find myself not enjoying the scene she's in.
Well, I think she's like intentionally a like personally disliked, sorry, dislikable person, where
Yeah, yeah.
she's too aggressive and she never explains anything, and she's clearly doing incredibly dangerous, life-threatening things to Mark and not
Yeah.
explaining why, and she
And then
clearly
she gets
knows.
really exasperated at him when he asks for an explanation.
Yeah,
And it's like, yeah, what, like that's all for a point, right? There's purpose behind that, but I just don't know what it is.
right. And also she clearly knows a lot more than Mark does, and than we do, and the fact that she isn't telling him and us is just really annoying.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
we do have to have Rick in corner for a second because Rickon appears briefly. I'm gonna feel so stupid if this is all like backwards and I'm in Bizarro land, but like Rickon is increasingly freaking me out. Like I worry that he's just like this sinister time bomb building up under the surface of this story, because the interactions that he has with our, the group of four friends, right? These four, the what we have been told is that these four were just great friends,
Hmm.
and the interaction we have is sort of like Rickon telling one of his kind of self-important grandstanding stories, and everybody kind of gently giving him shit about it the way that friends do. But I kind of felt like Rickon was not taking it that way. Like he was like hurt and confused and like felt bullied by them. And Mark's sitting there being like, "Oh, my friend Rickon, he's so silly." And there's just like a disconnect there. Maybe I'm like just projecting and reading too much into stuff, but um yeah, I don't know.
I'm certainly not as ready to definitively say you're wrong. I did rewatch that scene, and I don't have that read of it.
You don't see that.
But but I mean, you're gonna look like an absolute genius when Rickon is revealed as the mastermind. Can I be an asshole for a second here?
Of course.
R- Rickon's outdoorsy and loves rock climbing. Is that something we knew about him?
I don't think we knew that about him. For some reason, that doesn't strike me as that strange. Like he seems like the kind of guy who would have a broad range of eclectic interests, you know?
But he says something to the effect of is like, I just feel like at home in the outdoors. And I'm like, really? Maybe
I mean,
I'm forgetting stuff, but
no, I don't think you're forgetting stuff, but I do think that like one way of explaining why he's so weird is like maybe he was raised in a cottage in the woods, you know? And I don't know that to be a fact. It's just like, oh yeah, maybe he like that's why he's weird, is he's literally is at home in the woods. I don't know. He's an enigma. That's why I'm like paranoid, and why I say paranoid things about him is
sure.
in this story, it's like, you know, we've talked a million times about like every element of a story is intentional. What is the purpose of Rickon?
Yeah,
It's
that's
clearly
fair.
not just comic relief at this point.
Mm-hmm. He felt a little less Rickon-y to me in this episode. I think there's like one line that he says that sounds like a kind of a weird alt way of saying things that felt very Rickon, but for most of it, he felt very normal. And so I do wonder if part of what we're trying to say is that his response to the death of Gemma was to go full Rickon, as they say.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I don't know if I even had that thought consciously, but it was like, yeah, it seems like when Gemma died, there was a lot of fallout for all of them.
Yeah.
And the fact that, you know, Mark is devastated, which has knock-on effects on his sister, and then also they all separately had their own individual relationships with Gemma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you wanted to talk about?
Nope.
All right. Well, that is episode 7 of Severance. Matt, apparently episode 8 is 37 minutes long.
Huh.
per Wikipedia. So
interesting.
It's a little surprising to me.
Yeah. Wonder why.
I don't know. So we'll have maybe a short one next week, but we're starting to ramp up for the finale. 3 more episodes to go.
Excited.
Yeah. All right, folks, that is it for us this week. If you have any opinions on the Oscars, on Gladiator 2, or on episode 7 of Severance, please let us know. You can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, over on X @doofmedia, on Instagram @doofmedia, or on Reddit, reddit.com/r/doofmedia. Let us know what you think.
That's right. And if you're not already subscribed, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on all of the major podcasting platforms.
Yeah, and you know what else you should do? You should support us on Patreon. Head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and pledge at any of the available levels for a whole bunch of bonus content, including voting on book club and our monthly bonus podcast on the television show From, which a new episode of that I think is next week. We gotta schedule that, Matt.
We do.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Also, please consider giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Each review really does help us to get more exposure and introduce new people to the content we make here.
That's right. Folks, next week is our 300th episode. Episode 300 is next week, and we're doing something special for it. We are going to be watching the Zack Snyder movie 300. But on top of that, I think we're just going to take like a step back and kind of look at the show. It's 300 episodes, Matt. It's kind of crazy. So we're going to it's going to be a fun celebration of 300 episodes of the Doofcast. Maybe some talks about what we think we're going to do next, where the show is going to go from here, and all that fun stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah, that'll be next week on the show. We hope to see you there.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.